Hi, my name's Jack Redifer. Today, I'll be giving you a look into the life of Francis Asbury. I chose to research and teach you all about Francis Asbury, not because he was at the top of the topics list, but because he's from Virginia, which is my home state, and with quick research, I found out that he was one of the early leaders and founders of the American Methodist Church, in which I was christened by sprinklings as a baby and spent much of my early childhood in this denomination. Interesting point, at one point, at the height of Bishop Asbury's career, he became so popular that a letter could simply be addressed to Bishop Francis Asbury, United States of America, and it would find its way to him. So now let's go back to the beginning. Francis Asbury was born August 20th in 1745 in Hampstead Bridge, Staffordshire, England. As you can see, Bishop Asbury's hometown is represented by the red dot, which is in close proximity to the home place of John and Charles Wesley, represented by the black dot. As you may know, these brothers were integral parts of many early churches, including the Anglican Church, Methodism, and Wesleyanism. Other hometowns represented on here are Joseph Pillmore with the blue dot, Robert Strawbridge with the orange dot, and Philip Embry with the pink dot, all who came before or around the time of Francis Asbury to America and were key parts of the Methodist Church in America. And then finally is Thomas Coke, represented by the green dot, who was Bishop Asbury's co-superintendent of the Methodist Church in America. Now, Francis Asbury grew up in a Methodist household. He dropped out of school at age 12 and became a blacksmith's apprentice, and then by age 14, he was awakened in his faith. He began preaching full-time at 21, and then in 1771, his true calling came. John Wesley had a gathering of ministers, Methodist preachers, in which he called out to them and said, "Our brethren in America call aloud for help. Who are willing to go over and help them?" Francis Asbury was quick to volunteer. He landed on the coast of Pennsylvania in October of 1771, and so it began. The next 45 years of Francis Asbury's life were devoted to his circuit rides in America, spreading the word to everyone, everywhere. The ground covered by his riding was described as through the colonies and their western confines, up to Canada, and from Maine to the north to the Gulf of Mexico to the south, which this rough territory can be seen by the green shading on the map. He's said to have preached over 16,000 sermons and traveled by horse over 250,000 miles. That was no easy work. Asbury often fought illness and treacherous conditions, and many of his journals and diaries are public, where he can be seen talking about how rough this ride was and bluntly describing the conditions that he fought through. Yet he never gave up on his duty. He fought colds, fever, ulcers, and even chronic rheumatism, which ultimately put him in a carriage instead of horseback. Other notable locations on this map include Baltimore, Maryland, which was not only the home of Mount Olivet Cemetery where he's buried, but that was a notable point in his life. Baltimore hosted the Christmas conference of the Methodist denomination, in which Thomas Coke deemed him co-superintendent and ultimately bishop of the American Methodist Church. Then on here is Spotsylvania, Virginia, which is the place of his death, and here is Asbury College, which is established in his namesake in central Kentucky. Now back to his life's work in America. His rides made a huge impact on the Methodist Church, especially in its early upbringing. As you can see here, from the time he arrived and started his work in 1773 until his death in 1816, the Methodist membership grew from 1,100 to 214,000 strong, which can be seen by the red line here, which greatly outgrew its other fellow denominations. To match this expanding membership, Francis Asbury ordained over 700 preachers, including the first African-American minister in the Methodist Church. Now, his legacy within the Methodist Church is known for his creation of the church districts in America to reach even the most rural members, as well as his promotion of Sunday school, even though he himself was a dropout. And he was known for being willing to talk to slaves, just as much as he was the upper crust of the membership. The Methodist message that he spread was simple. God's love can be experienced by everyone, and then the Holy Spirit takes up residence in your life and makes a difference. Now, what's so historically relevant about an early circuit rider in the Methodist Church? Well, the key moment in Bishop Asbury's life was when the American Revolution began. He was the only one of the Methodist ministers at the time that chose to remain in America and not flee back to England. He remained politically neutral throughout the entire duration and even had to go into hiding at one point because his only other two options were to enlist in the American draft or to claim allegiance to England. Yet he went into hiding for a short time period so that he could stay neutral throughout the war. And luckily, by the time the Americans had won, he was welcomed back and was able to maintain his ministry and his rides throughout America. Another key point of his ideology is that Bishop Asbury hated slavery. Even at one point, he petitioned George Washington to enact anti-slavery legislation. Keep in mind, this was some 70 years before the Civil War. I believe this is one of the main reasons that his true legacy and greatness wasn't recognized for over 100 years after his death in the form of the monument that now sits in Washington, D.C. Bear with me. As you can see, this is the monument that now represents him in Washington, D.C. Thankfully, now we can all look back upon this man and see him for his legendary work and the great character that he maintained through many struggles. The great Bishop Francis Asbury.